Consulting Logistics, presented by Aborn and Company. I'm your host, Tim Dooner. Thank you for joining us today. Oh boy, do we have an episode today. Strap on your thinking caps because we are talking blockchain. We covered it on episode 4 of this podcast, which can be found at abornandco.com/podcast. That's abornandco.com/podcast, as well as in numerous articles on our blog at abornandco.com/blog. Blockchain. It's been marketed as the next great innovation in supply chain technology. But what can blockchain do for your supply chain, and how will we all be interacting with it in the future? Our guest today is Ramyanshu Datta, Program Director of IBM Blockchain Product Management, on the line to discuss the state of blockchain and your supply chain. Who better to evangelize the service than those who are on the front line of its development? As many of you know, IBM has been hard at work on developing a real-world application for this tech in your supply chain. So, without further ado, let's welcome Ramyanshu Datta to the show. Rami, thanks for taking the time out to lend us your knowledge on the development of blockchain, where it's at today, and how we will be interacting with it in the future.
Absolutely.
A little on your background. You came through the University of Texas at Austin, go Longhorns, studied engineering there, on to Chicago Booth School of Business, and you've worked for some impressive companies. Texas Instruments, NVIDIA, Intel, and now IBM. Some of the most innovative brands operating today. Welcome to Consulting Logistics.
Excellent.
That's a really interesting road that you've taken over here, but it seems like such a natural progression with these tech companies. But blockchain found you. As you were telling me before we got on the air, that when you were initially approached to join the blockchain team, you thought to yourself, well, I don't even have any Bitcoin. And what sold you on it was your future boss telling you, wouldn't you want to be able to track where your then 3-year-old's food came from?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a powerful statement. I have a 3-year-old as well, and food concerns, huge thing as a parent, Rami. Rami, what I usually hear, and I think a lot of people, and especially consider the ones without the tech background, so when they hear blockchain, they either say one of two things, especially in the context of supply chain. What the heck is blockchain? Or they think it's a method for Bitcoin. They know it as it's related to that. I was recently honored with an invite to IBM's B2B Innovation Day in New York. What I found most interesting there, and this is kind of how I wrapped my head around blockchain, was how IBM spoke to blockchain is its potential in data capture. This industry has a dire need to bring all of our data sources into one bucket. Rami, how does blockchain accomplish that?
Excellent. So let me take a step back and explain our approach out here. So IBM's B2B business, coming under the purview of Watson Supply Chain, is one of the largest EDI-based networks in the world, comprising of over 6,000 customers connected with nearly 500,000 trading partners. And I believe the transaction volume is about 7 million documents per day. Now, what's the problem in today's supply chain and even in advanced supply chains like EDI? The problem in today's supply chain is about clients not having sufficient visibility into the process with multiple intermediaries, as well as not having the same version of truth or record maliciously, but more often than not, due to the fact that everyone has their own version of truth or own set of recording mechanisms. A lot of inefficiencies and lack of trust in the supply chain. Now, what we call an advanced supply chain, which is based on EDI networks, does a lot of great things. I always say it does step 1 and 2 of getting into a blockchain. Step 1 being digitization of documents using a format which people understand. And second, forming of business networks with some initial set of rules. However, EDI is limited in that it's still point to point. So if there are 19 intermediaries, a buyer might be actually just communicating with the seller seller will communicate with a freight forwarder, who in turn is communicating with maybe a logistics provider, so on and so forth. So even though it's digital communication, it's point to point, and quite often you would have record discrepancies. And supply chain is a beautiful industry because a lot of these discrepancies don't come to the fore till invoices become due, which typically, given the accounts payable cycles are 90 or 120 days later. And that's when everyone's on the phone trying to solve or resolve issues. What we realized is that if we could provide a shared, unified version of truth to all the participants in any transaction, we could induce significant efficiencies in the system. And that could be used for a lot of other processes like invoice dispute reconciliation, or what we call shipment reconciliation, to ensure that your goods arrived on time in full, and even dealing with unsaleables management, like who damaged or destroyed the goods or led to loss of goods. So the idea is, what's a technology which provides the capability to do all of it? And that, it just so happens, is blockchain technology today. Why? Well, distributed databases existed for decades, but a shared ledger, which is based on distributed database technology, is only one component of blockchain. The other component centers around trust, which is based out of the immutability of transactions, as well as an audit trail of every single transaction, coupled with privacy, the right privacy levels where you can enable who sees what. It doesn't have to all on. Photos don't need to see the price a buyer is getting from a seller. Most of the time they don't need to, but they do need to see the volume and the source and destination, as well as some smart contracts to automate a lot of supply chain processes. So a combination of these four factors is what blockchain provides. Having said that, why is EDI still relevant? It's great. There's blockchain technologies. People ask me, why EDI, or why you're continuing with your EDI network? Now, I always say EDI is a result of 3 or 4 decades of fights in the supply chain industry to arrive at a few standard formats. They still don't have just one single format. There is X12 EDI, there is X25 EDFACT, there is XML, etc. So to me, the equivalence out there is that, is artificial intelligence replacing languages like English or Mandarin or Spanish? No. It may replace the translators for that. Similarly, in blockchain, you need a language of communication. Fortunately, in the supply chain B2B industry, we have had a communication languages around X12 EDI or X25 EDFACT. So our approach is to combine the power of blockchain, which I mentioned, the whole shared ledgers, trust, transparency, privacy, etc., with the existing advances in standardization of EDI, and enabling EDI documents with the right levels of processing to be put inside the blockchain, and consuming that information with micro applications or services pertaining to the supply chain industry. So we are starting with shared visibility. We'll follow that up soon with Internet of Things based shipment visibility, because supply chain finally is a physical world phenomenon. And to convert that, we have to convert the physical to digital world. We need Internet of Things. And then we'll follow it with plethora of supply chain processes around provenance tracking, around invoice management, around unsaleables management, so on and so forth. And we won't stop there. We want our clients, as we're building this platform, we want our clients or third-party providers to build applications on our platform. So we know no one company can actually build every application there is. And we are also going to provide APIs so that you can actually connect this shared ledgers platform data with your existing supply chain systems, whichever ones you're using out there. So that is our approach, which centers around blockchain, of course, but leverages your existing systems and networks, which you have invested tens of millions of dollars in. And we are not advocating any kind of rip and replace out there, almost making our blockchain-based platform backward compatible and enabling that to couple with your existing systems out there.
I'm glad you mentioned EDI, because I think some of the confusion in the market is blockchain a replacement for this or for that? And I'm glad you cleared that up. But you also touched on something I've really wanted to ask about. So I'm going to give you my best Alex Trebek. This AI-based supercomputer defeated Jeopardy Grand Champion Ken Jennings for $1 million jackpot.
That's pretty good, actually. Who is Watson?
Watson, you are right.
Yeah, Watson, because it was Watson who beat Ken Jennings, right? Let's talk about AI for a minute. How does Watson factor into your blockchain solution?
When you talk about artificial intelligence, a big part of it is actually training the data or training the machine. So training Watson on particular sets of things. Now, if blockchain could be a source of data for that training, what is it that you are ensuring? Well, you are ensuring that you can trace provenance of a lot of data that has been used to train Watson. So if you are making your demand planning system based on Watson or some other AI tool, and you're leveraging data from your blockchain-based supply chain platform, which we're making, the good news is, first, this is, as I say, AI is data in, data out. I always say the other side of it is could be garbage in, garbage out. But you are ensuring it's sanitized, trusted, agreed upon, single version of truth data, which is being fed into your AI systems for training them. So we expect the quality of insights to improve significantly if you leverage blockchain-based data from your permissioned blockchain networks.
There's a lot of moving parts on a supply chain. You just touched on that, and you mentioned that Watson can help with some of those things. But how do shippers go about training and educating their suppliers, carriers, forwarders, banks, and other partners in doing their part to enter that good data? Because you want the, good data in, good data out, garbage data in, garbage data out. So how do you go about educating all of these different partners in using the system?
Excellent. So obviously there has to be some discussion before in any network on the quality of, or rather on the protocols. But one aspect of our platform is a founder can set up a network, ask partners to join it. And if there is a discrepancy in between records of different people, instead of that can getting kicked down the road and then someone finding out 90 days later during invoice payment, blockchain's innate properties help that surface right away. And so depending on what kind of a protocol the founder set up, it can either just flag and continue or it can stop transactions. But in either case, there will be an indelible record of whose and which record is out of sync with the rest of the participants in the network. And that is, I think, step one in blockchain providing sanitized, or I would say at least agreed upon data for AI training. If there was a discrepancy in the data, they would know exactly where it has happened. And moreover, they can actually set up smart contracts to prevent any further transactions propagating. They can quarantine the system, the particular system which is out of sync. So there are multiple mechanisms depending on the founder's choice of smart contracts for corrective mechanisms. But blockchain in its innate property will surface any discrepancy between ledgers of multiple participants in a shared ledger.
When you say founder, just so our listeners can get familiar with the vocabulary, a founder is what? Someone who initiates the blockchain?
Someone who initiates a ledger in our blockchain. So the way we have designed our shared ledgers platform, we let a founder start their ledger, invite participants for certain business processes. So a retailer might invite all their suppliers or a couple of the suppliers maybe and a couple of their transporters and form a ledger with it. And they don't have to solve all of the world's problems there. They could actually just focus it on a particular shipment or a particular set of transactions. Now, one of these transporters might be focusing on another process in their ledger, which would be around management of trucks or subcontracted agencies, along with the retailers who are being served by those subcontracting agencies. Well, in that case, the transport management agency would set up their own ledger, and in that ledger, they are the founder and the retailers are participants or trading partners out there. So we are trying to maintain as much of the current hub and spoke nature of supply chain, and there are going to be multiple hubs and multiple spokes for each hub, which will be reflective of the actual supply chain transaction process. So anyone can be a founder, and they, in our shared ledgers platform, they would actually bear the brunt of the rule making of course, with consent from their trading partners.
Glad you brought this up too, because when you mention transparency, well, it's a great thing. You start to spook shippers a little bit because they start thinking that their carriers are going to start seeing rates that they're getting, and other partners or the person that they're selling to, their buyer, might see their cost from factory. Things like that. So how does the founder go about controlling the security of the ledger and the permissions and who can see what?
Great question. And this will point to another reason we are using EDI or standard data formats as inputs, not in addition to the fact that we want to be compatible with existing systems. Blockchain will give you privacy, but it's about privacy at a document level. And one thing I want to also clarify, a lot of blockchain purists will say this, that you're storing documents in blockchain. No, we don't ever store documents in blockchain. We basically store events in blockchain pertaining to those documents. If those documents get tampered, those events or hash codes or etc. related to those documents will indicate so. So just to clarify, every time I say storing documents or information in blockchain, it's basically events that are stored in the blockchain. But moving ahead, how we are ensuring the right levels of privacy. So blockchain will ensure that any participant gets a privacy at a document level. So let's say a founder, a retailer comes on, brings their supplier and brings their logistics provider into the ledger. 3-member ledger, which I say is the minimum, because anything less than that, and you can do point-to-point EDI communication will be pretty good too. Now with this 3-member ledger, if they want to share the purchase order has information that's relevant to everyone, which is volume that has to be picked up. Maybe 100 pellets has to be picked up from a supplier and delivered to a retailer. Address of the supplier, address of the retailer, okay, or maybe source and destination of the shipment. But it also has information that may be confidential or proprietary. Specifically, say the price the retailer is getting for maybe buying tissue papers or whatever they're buying in volume. So what we provide, because we use a standard document format, is field level privacy. Because the documents are in a standard format like EDI, X12 EDI or X25 EDFACT, which will support, the founder can decide which fields get shared with who. So let's say the retailer is a founder out here. The retailer comes on board, sets up their ledger, invites the supplier, invites the logistics provider. It ensures that the supplier and the retailer can see everything in the purchase order, but the logistics provider sees only the source, the destination, and the volume of shipments to ensure, correct on time and full delivery, but does not get to see the proprietary price which the retailer is getting. This is only possible because we're not just taking any format documents, because in any format document, you won't know where the heck the price line item is, but standard format documents which we use of X12 EDI or X25 EDFACT.
So we put all of this data into the blockchain. How can we use this data to meet deliverables such as shorten lead times, as well as highlighting all of the other advantages that blockchain promises? What are some applications? How are people pulling data out of this, and what's the real world application for shippers out there wondering if they should start becoming a founder?
Mm-hmm. So the bare minimum application, as I always say with table stakes with blockchain, is ensuring everyone's records are aligned. So our first application which will come out is about shared visibility. So you will know if an advance ship notification or a purchase order has been uploaded. You will get to see what you're allowed to see, and all of the participants in that ledger will have access to the exact same volume maybe, or prices if they're allowed to see the price, and they will know exactly when the shipment is left at a particular point, initially based on when something like an advance ship notification was uploaded, and in future based on IoT technology. They will know exactly where the shipment has been, under which conditions and temperature and pressure once we induce IoT data, and how many units were picked up, how many was delivered. All that information exists maybe in the system today. The only problem is everyone could have their own version of that information. With the blockchain, we will at least ensure that everyone gets to see the exact same thing or has the exact same record. Now, beyond that, what we could do with that data it's the world is yours kind of thing. We would start with obviously base supply chain applications like a quick mechanism to resolve invoice disputes. Because once you ensure you have everything on record, now we just need to get into provide a mechanism to sort of resolve a dispute on any particular invoices, given that the facts are all agreed upon. Unsaleables management is going to be another big thing. From what I've heard, one technology company pays a retailer about $23 million a year for lost and damaged goods, simply because it doesn't want to get into the process of figuring out who damaged them, who lost them. This process could become a lot more fair and transparent. We could go out in future, track provenance of every single part. So let's say I've got an automaker out here and wants to order parts from different parts of the world. They can ensure where each particular part came from, what conditions it has been in, if there is some kind of RFID on it or some kind of digitization mechanism, IoT based. They can actually figure out the entire provenance, not just through shipment notifications, but also through the digitization of exact location of that part. So those are some of the applications which will come up in future. And as I said, we are just at the beginning of this supply chain journey. Some clients might want their own custom applications. They could build some of those too out there on our platform. What we will start with is ensuring that everyone has the facts all aligned. Once that is done, everything else becomes a normal flow out here, just a more efficient way of doing your everyday supply chain process. And then you can take some of this information and use that for predicting your future inventory cycles. Are we, this particular shipper, I've been, for last few transactions, I've got some information. There have been damages going on in one particular area. Maybe that can be taken as an insight to AI-based tool, which can predict, okay, that could probably happen because of multiple reasons. One interesting thing I had heard of once was quite often ground handlers in a hurry to load cargo in airports run their forklifts into pellets by mistake. Sometimes, it takes a lot of what they call quote unquote Sherlock Holmes work to figure out where did the damage occur. Well, here we will know exactly where the shock sensors went red. And sometimes it's not just about cure, but rather about prevention. They could send an alert saying, hey, your shock sensors are going very high, calm down out here. Or send an alert to someone else that, hey, someone has left some pharmaceuticals outside the refrigeration unit. Maybe you need to put those inside a refrigeration unit as soon as possible. So those are some of the use cases we can think of around, but it'll start with obviously ensuring on time in full delivery of goods, and then subsequently go on to the next big thing, order to cash, and then a bunch of other processes that will come up.
The other thing that you mentioned, and I think we should touch on it really quickly, is IoT, Internet of Things, because I know some listeners heard that and, their eyes started to fog over or their brains started to fog over because they're not that familiar. Internet of Things is the way that devices communicate with one another. Tell me a little bit about Internet of Things and blockchain in a way that would make sense to shippers. What is IoT and blockchain? What would it do for them?
Yeah, so in the supply chain world, if you really think about it, and I'll talk about IoT with respect to the supply chain world only right now. Supply chain is fundamentally a physical world phenomenon. Loading of goods, counting of goods, conditions of goods, shocks, pressure, temperature. Think about pharmaceuticals being transmitted across the world. You have to ensure that it's under it's refrigerated, it's under the right conditions of pressure, there's not like too much shock on it, or there are shock absorbers to prevent shocks. All of this information, as well as simple GPS based tracking of pharmaceuticals, as well as barcoding it and things like that, all of this physical world which needs to be converted to digital. And Internet of Things is that bridge. It's about ensuring these devices or sensors feed in information into a system and digitize that information around temperature, pressure, sensors, shock, etc., GPS location, so on and so forth. And one of our approaches is that there are multiple, I think hundreds of Internet of Things platforms in the world. Our approach is not to support each one of them directly in our IBM Shared Ledgers platform, but there is a business within IBM which does that. It's our Watson IoT or Watson Internet of Things business. And what we have said is that we are going to be integrating their capabilities into our shared ledgers platform. So if a client comes in and says, hey, I've got this IoT vendor and I use them, fantastic. Are they in the list of supported ones? Or can they get in the list of supported ones for Watson IoT? And that's a pretty large list from what I've seen. And they say yes. And they're like, fantastic. They will help you onboard or digitize your data, and we will get it into the blockchain through our shared ledgers platform. So fundamentally, IoT, not just in supply chain world, but across the spectrum, is about converting physical world phenomena into digital world things.
It's interesting that you mentioned food a few times, and food is what sold you on working on this blockchain project. And when I've read articles about adoption of blockchain now, it usually has to do with food supply chains. And it makes sense, right? If you want organic certification, things like that, you need a transparent ledger. So what is adoption of blockchain right now in supply chain? Who's using it?
Yeah, so IBM has launched the IBM Food Trust platform, which is about tracking provenance of food items. There's some information out there on the web about it also, but it can track down mangoes to which farm it came from, ensuring if it's organic, then where exactly it came from, as well as if there is a recall, finding out which batch of mangoes has to be recalled. Initial pilots were done in partnership with Walmart. Right now, we have, I don't know the exact number, but somewhere around 9 or 10 big food companies working with IBM on our IBM Food Trust platform.
So that's blockchain now. And we hear about AI, IoT, blockchain all coming together. So 5-10 years from now, because I'm of the opinion too, when these things go mainstream, when there's widespread adoption, people aren't even thinking of it as blockchain, right? It's the system that they log into to track these things. So where do you see blockchain, the IBM solution, and all these things coming together in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? What's the future look like?
The future, as I see it, is that as a mango or a pharmaceutical reaches your desk, you know exactly where it has been, you know who had possession of it, you know what condition it has been through. You also ensure that every participant in getting that mango to you has their records in sync with your records. You can predict in future where to order your, whether it be mangoes or pharmaceuticals from, and how to plan your inventory in a much smarter way so that you don't have any disruptions, maybe due to weather, maybe due to other supply chain issues. You basically have a smart, interconnected, transparent supply chain if you see the future tomorrow with artificial intelligence, IoT, and blockchain combined.
Romy, how can our listeners learn more about IBM blockchain? Where should they go after listening to this episode?
I think the starting point would be ibm.com/blockchain. That has a lot of information. Subsequently, of course, you can share my contact information, and we have a lot of marketing collateral in our Watson supply chain pages also. Then there are a fair amount of IBM engagement forums as well as user group meetings. There are meetings of the Hyperledger community, which IBM is a part of, and IBM backs significantly. That's the open source blockchain fabric that IBM backs. Those are a few places to find out more information about IBM's blockchain efforts.
And if you're a shipper and you want to start using the IBM blockchain solution, is that available to everyone yet, or is it still in the pilot program stage?
Right now, it's still in the pilot program stage. Later this year, we expect to get it out into beta and have as many people using it as we can and giving us feedback out there.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. I can't wait to see the real world application in use, especially someone on our end that does a lot of data capture and looks at big data, analytics, all of those kind of things. I personally think this data capture would be a great way to help reduce supply chain costs, as well as provide transparency to the ledger, amongst the other things we've spoke to.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for your time today. I'm excited for the next era of shipping that blockchain intends to usher in. For you, what's the next project on the table? What are you guys on to next? What's the next thing to come out that you can speak to?
So the shared ledgers offering, as we said, it's called IBM Supply Chain Shared Ledgers, which is IBM's blockchain-based platform for B2B transactions, leveraging your existing systems and networks like EDI. We are expecting to beta that later this year, and we definitely are looking to connect with as many beta users as possible who would help us improve and optimize that platform and help us get it out into the market even quicker for purchase out there to help our clients. So that's what's keeping me occupied right now.
You must be very busy. I'll let you get back to work. Thank you so much for stepping on the mic with us. When blockchain gets a little bit deeper down the road, maybe we'll have you back in the future once shippers start using it.
Absolutely. It'll be my pleasure.
Thanks again to our guest, Ramyanshu Datta of IBM. The future, we've seen it, and it looks bright, and it looks beautiful, and it looks bold, and it looks data-driven. If IBM has their say, blockchain is going to be a big part of your supply chain. And as he said, it's not a replacement for EDI or brokerage transactions or even document transfer. It's a data transfer protocol. And no, you do not need Bitcoin to use it. If you'd like to reach out to Rami, you can do so at rdatta@us.ibm.com. This has been Consulting Logistics, presented by A. Bourne and Company. For this episode and all of our previous episodes, please visit aborneandco.com/podcast or simply search Consulting Logistics on your favorite podcast player of choice. Concerned about elevated supply chain costs in this tough transportation market? Visit aborneandco.com to set up a complimentary consultation with one of our managed freight solution experts and learn how we have successfully negotiated over $5 billion in client freight expenses. If you have any questions, comments, requests, and guest bookings, email me at tdooner@aborneandco.com. That's TDOONER@aborneandco.com. That's it for us. Until next week, I'm Tim Dooner saying take care and happy shipping.